Today, my guest is Jodi Chaffee, and we are going to talk about family values. She just launched her family cultural podcast, and it is amazing. You guys should check that out. But today, we're going to talk about what she does, and that's helping families redefine success for their family and what that means to them, and questioning the norms and narratives that they have brought from their past or past generations of their family, and create what they want to move forward with their family traditions. So, Jodi, thank you for joining us. It's really important what you've been talking about. And it wasn't until I listened to your podcast I realized that I got divorced 7 years ago. And I had this idea of the traditions that I would create with my daughter. And we were starting them. And when I got divorced, that all went out the window. And I look back and I think, oh my gosh, there are things that I wanted to do that now I didn't do. And then listening to you, I thought this all connects and this would be so great to share with my audience. So thank you so much for what you do and being here today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, Sheree. So thank you for having me. I like to talk about the habits, the rituals, the norms, and all of those stem from your family identity and your values. And so when you as a parent model certain behaviors because you value those behaviors, that is what your child picks up on. Because so much of what we do is conditioned into us socially, and a little bit genetically as well, but even there are studies that are proving that epigenetics is also a social construct, these things that shape our genetics. And so the behaviors, the habits, the norms, the things that we do, they impact ourselves and our children and our grandchildren, like you just said. It's being able to instill those values into our children through modeling that behavior, through expressing that it's something that you value, and then coming together to agree on what you want your values to look like, and the habits and the practices that you want to adopt as a family because of those values.
I totally agree. Absolutely. So when you're working with families, where do you have them start?
So I like to have people start with examining the values and beliefs where they come from. So a lot of times, when families, when ourselves, for example, for myself, I have judgments, and I judge myself based on things, based on my appearance, my success, my failures, and those judgments stem because at some point in my family history growing up, my parents or people around me suggested that something about that, there's a lot in our culture about body image, and there's a lot in our culture about financial success and these kinds of things. And so we grow up with these kinds of judgments, and we look around and oh, that person, and you start to create these kinds of judgments. And I think that the first step is to analyze those things and where they come from. And so I call that like identifying your family culture. I teach family culture as like it's a coming together to go on like a family road trip or something. And when you start out, you want to know, like, what is your vehicle, right? Like, what is this thing that you're getting into that's going to take you to where you want to go? And that stems from your family history and your genetics, and it stems from the traditions and norms you grew up with, and it also stems from the stories and shared experiences that you have as a family and the environment that you grew up in. And so all of those things shape what your identity is, that vehicle that you're going in as a family. And so when you start to analyze those things, you start to see where the stories, where the narratives, where the social conditioning came from, then you can start to take inventory of what's working and what's not.
That's awesome. That's a great start. So I'm going to ask you, so what are your habits, or what did you learn from your family when it comes to toothbrushing?
So I don't, that's a good question, because when you think about as far as, dental and dental hygiene, I mean, we definitely went to the dentist regularly, but my mom is really stickler or really picky about the dentist we would see, because she didn't like, any kind of oral surgery or things like that. She wanted to be able to avoid anything like that. So that's a big part of my dental narrative growing up is being able to trust the doctors and feel like, because we don't know. We open our mouths, we have no education about what's going on inside there, and you hear them spouting out, oh, this tooth, and they have code words that you know for each of the letters of your teeth, and so we go in there basically ignorant and at the mercy of the dentist and the hygienist, And so my mom was always very particular about these. She would always get like second opinions. It's very hereditary on my mom's side that we have like almost an underbite. And so, the dentist would always try to tell her that she needed to have like a jaw surgery to fix this like projecting jaw, the bottom jaw, mandible, is that the one? That's the bone?
Yeah.
But she was always skeptical of that. And so, that definitely came with me with my dental hygiene narrative of, what is necessary, and, just being able to maintain good dental hygiene. My parents were also very skeptical of fluoride. And so they would often, like, I don't even know if my parents brush their teeth, honestly. I think they use like natural toothpaste and stuff like that. So it's really interesting having watched that and now knowing that, my mom has a lot of false teeth. I'm sorry, Mom. And it's just because they were very holistic and they just felt like they wanted to do things holistically, and I think it's resulted in some of their dental hygiene kind of being on the less healthy spectrum. So then when I grow up and I was taking health classes, I did public health, and that was my degree was in health promotions. And, I started learning about the different things that were scientifically based that had to do with our health and even dental hygiene, about, tooth cavities and, things like that, depending on the things that we eat or things, that. So I started to get this different sort of education through that, understanding that there is scientifically backed research for, fluoride and taking care of your teeth and taking care of the enamel of your teeth and things like that. So yeah, it was interesting growing up. They supported us to brush our teeth, but it was never like, it was very subtle, I would say.
Right. And that's why I'm so passionate about this now. And in her defense, back then, they didn't do prevention or try to save teeth. They pulled them. And now we are more preventive oriented and trying to intercept things before they become a problem. But, people wait until they're in pain. And in dentistry, that's the worst thing you can do because dental disease is silent. By the time you're in pain, it's progressed to a really severe stage, basically. I equivalent it to you're in stage 4 cancer by the time you feel pain in your mouth.
Sad. Yeah.
So that's the equivalent, because now you're having to make a decision. You're either going to need a root canal or have the tooth pulled by the time you get that pain. So it's too late to wait to that point. So, I'm still trying to figure out how to position this and not be prevention, because it's basically, this is what you need to do all along. As you were talking, you kind of changed your perspective. So, So when you had kids and started with them, what were the habits that you then taught them based on your, since we're talking heritage and
Sure. I mean, we just made sure that we have nightly routine habits and morning routine habits, I mean, we homeschool, so I have to say we are a little bit relaxed in the morning, but our nighttime routine is we have done the exact same night routine since our first child was born. Even before they were born, my husband and I had the same routines that we would practice every night. And so having those routines, implementing them, modeling for our kids that this is what we do at night. It involves dental hygiene, getting ready for bed, and then we read together and we pray together and do things like that, and then we tuck them in at night, And because early on it was like, okay, babies need routine, and then as they grow up, it sticks with them. So yeah, we definitely adopted routine. That's part of our culture.
That's what we're talking about, right? Habit and routine for traditions. And that's important. Even as I get older, I know my 15-year-old, there are certain traditions that she's like, no, we can't do, because there was one year I wanted to change something. She's like, no, like that's our tradition. We're not getting rid of that. So
yeah. Well, I mean, that's another aspect of family culture, but I also talk a lot, like I said, when I got an education that was scientifically backed about hygiene and health, I started to question and started to evaluate and take inventory, like what is really the right thing, what I want to be able to do that, sometimes the traditions that we grow up with, or even traditions we start out with as a family, aren't always the best ones. Or, like after I started my family and Pinterest became a thing, and so then it's like, oh my goodness, are we supposed to be like Pinterest perfect all the time? And it's people started getting really obsessed with that idea and thinking that moms have to throw these perfect birthday parties and Christmases and having Elf on the Shelf and blah, 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 and all these things. Well, those types of traditions are dysfunctional if they don't serve your family, if you are stressing out and you have anxiety about it, like just don't do it. So make sure you're doing the things that do serve your family. I think sometimes, like you had mentioned, how dental hygiene becomes so low on the totem pole is because our social values and our cultural norms are placing it there. Because, if you're getting your kids ready to rush out the door and get them out to school on time, well, the top priority is being on time for school. But then if they're not brushing their teeth, then that's a social construct that says if you're late for school, then you're irresponsible, and it's like, well, change around that priority. What is it that's causing you the anxiety to miss and skip over brushing teeth? Question that. Don't just do it just because that's the cultural norm telling you that what your value is based on, oh, my kids are on time at school, so therefore I'm a valuable parent, I'm a good parent. Well, is that true?
It's all on where you place value. Like you brought up fluoride. Fluoride isn't for everyone. And some people feel fluoride is poison and some people feel fluoride is beneficial. And I know even as a dental professional, I thought my daughter needed to have fluoride. Well, she has sensory issues and she doesn't like tastes and textures. And so I went through probably 10 different toothpastes before I realized I wasn't going to use toothpaste with my daughter. And so that had to be something that I had to break, that this just wasn't going to be what was right for my family. And so we had well water. So I felt fluoride was important. And we ended up just not using toothpaste. So just because everybody uses toothpaste and that's what we're told we're supposed to do, doesn't mean that's what's going to be right for your family. And exactly. I had to, it took me a few months to let go of the fact that I wasn't going to use toothpaste on my daughter. And when I started then researching it, like you said, I realized, you know what? That fluoride toothpaste, it's really not something I need to do. The benefit, yes, there's fluoride that will help strengthen your teeth. Yes, the toothpaste helps freshen your breath, but ultimately it's in there for 2 minutes. I'm having her swish and spit. It's really not providing me any benefit if that's the way that I'm using it. So I found another product that I could put on after, but I had to break what I was taught, what I learned, and those habits are hard to break. And I mean, I fought it for the longest time, and now that's why I'm kind of doing what I'm doing, because if I would go back, I wouldn't have fought her so long to try to use toothpaste. It's not that important. So, but that's breaking my cultural belief and then doing what's right for my family.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. So then the next step is then figuring out for your family where you want to go with this. It's like, okay, you want to avoid, in your instance, you want to avoid having dental problems, right? You want to avoid getting into that stage 4, like you said, when you're at that place where you already have pain. So habits, modeling good behavior, and then also helping your child understand their values, and the values meaning what you want to establish and accomplish in the long run. If you discuss as a family that one of your core values is health, then you have a family policy that we brush teeth every day, twice a day. We do things that take care of our teeth and our health, right? And so, it involves making sure you're eating the right kinds of foods, and it make sure you're doing the brushing your teeth and flossing and all those things that your family has decided is part of your health values, right? Because then you say, okay, in the long run, because we don't want to have dentures when we're older, or we don't want to have, we don't want to have health problems and dental problems when we grow up. And so then it's like, okay, you see your child is like, oh, I don't want to brush my teeth. I don't one more thing. And I don't want to do it for 2 minutes or whatever. It becomes a fight, right? But then you can sit down at a family meeting or something and remind them, hey, remember we talked about that in 20 years, you want to still have your teeth? If you fight about brushing your teeth, are you going to see that happening? Are you going to be able to, and then they get their own realization of saying, oh, right, this is important to me. And they will start to act on that realization, because there's a lot of things you can do, like sticker charts or, rewards and things like that to help encourage your kids to keep those habits, establish those habits. But like I said, modeling it and then establishing that as a value where, look, we want you to have good, healthy teeth, because in 20 years they could fall out if you don't, or, you won't be able to eat candy anymore because your teeth will hurt every time you bite into a candy bar. And they're like, what, really? So being able to remind them of that vision that you have based on your values, and then implement the policies. Our policy is we brush our teeth every day, or, our policy is we make sure that we're not eating the things that are going to deteriorate our teeth, or things like that. So it comes back to also that the values, and that part in my structure is what I define as the navigation portion of this family culture journey. So after you've established, who you are, you've identified some of these norms and habits and traditions that have come with you, and you've taken inventory, then you want to navigate. You want to figure out, okay, where are we going? What do we want to become? And that is your mission as a family. And then you want to say, okay, well, how do we get there and why? And that's your family vision. And then you want to decide, like, okay, so what are our core values? What defines us and who we are and what we're known for? That's like your compass of your family, and then the policies are like street signs and road laws and things like that, right? That every family has. And sometimes it's hard to implement, but that's why you need to establish the mission, vision, and values of your family, so that once you enact these policies, everybody is agreeing to them and on board with them. They go, oh yeah, because we talked about our values, our health is a core value of our family, and so this policy makes sense that we uphold our dental hygiene.
That's awesome. And then they feel part of the process, so they're more willing to follow through with it because they've been part of the decision-making process.
Yeah, exactly. And then they become they feel like they're part of something. I think that's the thing, like with our families, it's like, oh, my family life is just so messy and all our kids are just going to do their own thing. And then you kind of lose control. It's almost like when you're in that car journey on your family road trip, you decide you're just going to put it in cruise control or neutral even and just roll downhill, right? Like, well, then who knows where you're going to end up? Or at every intersection, you're like, oh, let's just flip a coin and see where we end up. Well, then everybody's going to be scattered and you're going to be lost. It's like, I mean, it sounds funny applying this to a dental hygiene, but it's like, it's one of those things that if that's a value you have for your family, because it's just like you said, your dental health, your mouth is such a big part of you. I mean, I have really sensitive teeth. And so I've gotten to that place where like, I avoid some like sugary things because I bite into it and it's like, oh, that hurts, and cold stuff, and it's like, man, if only I had taken better care of my teeth as a kid, and I'd be able to avoid some of this pain. And its impacts in my whole life, because sometimes I'm like, well, I don't want to eat this thing because now I can't, and it's become more and more uncomfortable to enjoy some foods.
We should talk about that.
Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And that's something that another thing that I talk about is how when you're on this road trip, you're on this family culture journey, just like any vehicle, you need maintenance. There's service that you need to be able to do to that vehicle in order to keep it going. And so I talk about having those family meetings and communication, and also who's the driver, who is driving this vehicle, and parents, if you are modeling that behavior and establishing these practices and recognizing the ways that we can help and condition our children to have good habits and beliefs, then you're the driver. And then I talk about trust is the fuel for your vehicle. And so if your parent or your children, if they don't trust you and you're trying to tell them to brush their teeth, they're going to be like, yeah, whatever, no thanks, and so trust is a big part of this process. And also having the coping strategies when things aren't going right, or when you're stressed out and you're just going, I don't know what to do anymore. Well, that's almost like, okay, all of my other devices, my GPS is broken, my compass is broken. Okay, we got to bust out the roadmap and follow the detours, or, you know, these things to get us back on track. Like if your family is already suffering or struggling from dental problems or any other issues that you have with your family, then following those detours and figuring out, you know, how to navigate those changes and those disruptions in your plans to get back on track or start a new track altogether that's how you cope, you know. And it has a big part, it plays a big role in who you end up becoming, because how you cope with stuff is really what becomes your default. You know, if you it really is. I mean, if you're coping if you have destructive and dysfunctional behaviors when you cope with stress, then that's what becomes your norm. And so it's learning how to adopt different kinds of behaviors so that so that you can cope in a healthy way, in a constructive way. So, you know, if your family is struggling with those kinds of things, like find constructive ways to cope. I mean, and even going back to the beginning, like reestablishing, if your family is struggling with brushing and having those teeth brushing habits, then just reestablish it. You know what I mean? Like, well, I know up to this point we haven't been very good at modeling and establishing this behavior, but from here going forward, this is something we want to be able to do. And that's okay.
Well, and I didn't realize till I had a child how I actually behaved and things that I said until it came back at me, and I was like, oh, what? Yeah. And when my parents moved back in with me and I was living with my mom, I'm like, oh, now I know where I get that from, and I've passed that on. I that needs to stop.
Yeah. You start to recognize your culture when your children mirror back to you what you yeah. It's so true.
And that's why having this roadmap that you talk about, totally on board with that. That's perfect. I love it. So totally. So I appreciate it so much. So what is it that you would like parents to know? And then where can they find you?
So I want parents to know that even though family life is messy and it's scary, it doesn't have to be. You can take control of the narratives and the norms and the constructs and the social conditioning that you grew up with. You can change. You can face it and take that inventory and decide for yourself. Because, you know, I was just listening to a talk that was like, if enough of us say no to the dominant culture that's out there that's negative and dysfunctional, then that's what's going to change our society. And that's my mission. That's the movement that I'm trying to create. You know, that's why I renamed my podcast the Family Culture Movement, is because I want this to be a movement that if enough of us say no to the dominant, negative, and dysfunctional culture, then we're going to shape society. And so that's what I believe in. And you can find me at homeandfamilyculture.com. That's my podcast home. And you can also sign up for my Family Success Roadmap. It's a free membership that I have there at that URL. So that's where you can find me.
That is awesome. And then do you do coaching to teach them how to create that roadmap? Do you have a program for that then?
You know, I have that option available. I'm also working on creating a course so that I can help walk people through that process. But at this point, I have like consultation that you can sign up to do with me.
That's awesome. I think that's great. And I appreciate you being on here. And I mean, I feel that strongly. That's why I created the Healthy Mouth Movement, but mine's a little more niche down. And I thought that when we were doing this, it would be a good marriage of what you do versus what I do to create habits. So I totally appreciate you being on here and sharing your wisdom. And you guys know where to get a hold of her, because I think that when you're trying to create habits with your kids, starting with what she's doing would be just a great thing to do. I've even implemented some of the things that I have heard from listening to her podcast. So I definitely recommend listening to the Family Cultural Podcast.
Thank you.
So, thank you so much. Looking forward to talking to you again also.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you.